I think Cam Ward is the guy, even if Shador may have a higher floor, in my opinion. But if, again, going for that guy who you think is a franchise quarterback, I think Cam Ward screams that to me.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast. I am your host, Dave Helman. And last time we talked, I said I was sure that we'd have some more news to cover when we got to our next episode. I'll be honest, it was a figure of speech. I mean, yeah, things changed in the NFL, but it was just kind of a throwaway line. I did not realize that in the day and a half between episodes, all of the news for a calendar year would get dumped on the NFL since Tuesday. That is exactly what has happened. Look, we had a whole show planned. We're going to get to it. We got a really fun first round mock draft. We did a writer's mock draft at foxsports.com. All of our writing staff got together to collaborate on a first round mock. I had Ralph Vacchiano and Ben Arthur of foxsports.com hop on to walk me through it, go through some of the thought process, highlight some of the big picks, what teams might be thinking, what we're hearing about what they might do, all that good stuff. Great show, right? Didn't realize we'd have to preface it with a huge chunk of NFL news because, again, every story that could happen did happen here in these last 2 days. So let's just speed run it to catch you up on the goings on in the NFL. Free agency opens in a little less than a week. The tampering window for negotiations on new contracts is Monday, so less time than that. Needless to say, NFL teams are hustling to address all of their business before the new league year. See if I can hustle as hard as they did to take you through all this news. Let's start at the top with the reigning champs, because the Philadelphia Eagles have been busy. Back-to-back days, they locked up two of the biggest pieces of their Super Bowl run. On Tuesday, it was a 2-year, $41 million extension for Saquon Barkley. On Wednesday, it's a 3-year, $51 million deal for linebacker Zach Bond. Now, Barkley, it's a no-brainer. He was arguably the best player in football last year. He's the heart and soul of a Super Bowl team. His extension rewards him for a 2,000-yard season, keeps him in place until after the 2028 season. More importantly, you extend a guy like that to give yourself flexibility. The more years on Barkley's deal, the more you can move his money and make things affordable, which is probably a big reason why 24 hours after Barkley signs, the Eagles get a deal done with Zach Bond. It's one of the coolest stories I can remember in my time covering the NFL. Started 14 games in 4 years with the New Orleans Saints, averaged 500 snaps a year. Signs with Philly a year ago right now. And remember, Zach Bond, the forgotten linebacker signing, because the Eagles gave more money to Devin White. And what happens? Vic Fangio moves Bond to inside backer. He grabs the starting job. He starts 16 games. He is a first-team All-Pro, 150 tackles, basically ends the Super Bowl before halftime by picking off Patrick Mahomes in his own red zone. And now he is on a $51 million deal to remain in the center of that Eagles defense. His career earnings through his first 5 years in the league were roughly $9 million. So his salary in 2025 will be basically double what he's made to this point in his career. Super cool story. And it's even cooler. Bond was going to cash in regardless, but it's very cool that he did it with the team where he broke out. Obviously, the Eagles saw something in him. He rewards that faith by signing in Philadelphia. I can imagine he appreciates Fangio, appreciate what the Eagles have done for him just as much as the Eagles love having him. Crazier than that, I bet you right now the Eagles are not done. But man, what a hell of a start for your first 2 days entering into the league year. Meanwhile, far from being the end of this, Maxx Crosby agrees on a 3-year, $106.5 million extension so you can stop photoshopping Crosby into your favorite team's uniform for another couple of years. lot of speculation he might jump. Obviously, the Raiders have struggled to win recently, but Crosby has decided to stay on and remain the face of this Pete Carroll era. Bumps the new range for the top of the edge rusher market to roughly $35 million per year. So yes, it's cool for Crosby. It's great for the Raiders, but I think the main story here is what that means for everyone else. $35 million per year is the new benchmark to clear. And remember, Myles Garrett wants a trade, which would probably come with a new deal. Trey Hendrickson wants a new deal. TJ Watt could use a new deal. Micah Parsons, and throw in Aiden Hutchinson for good measure. All of those guys could be angling for new contracts this offseason. So the edge rusher market could be booming. Good luck to all the negotiators involved. Let's keep it pushing to a team that has been similarly busy to the Eagles. The Bears, 2 big moves in the last 2 days. They addressed 2 trades to address they executed 2 trades to address their very leaky offensive line. On Tuesday, it was a 6th round pick in this year's draft for Jonah Jackson. On Wednesday, it is a 2026 4th round pick for perennial all-pro Joe Thuney. Surprised at that. Not even a pick in this year's draft for a guy as valuable as Joe Thuney. Jonah Jackson makes perfect sense. He was a Pro Bowler in Detroit with Ben Johnson, fell out of favor in LA. I think a large part of that was injury, though. So it makes perfect sense that Ben Johnson thinks he can get him playing back at a high level. And for a 6th round pick, why wouldn't you take that swing? Joe Thuney needs no introduction whatsoever. Like I said, 4-time All-Pro, 4-time Super Bowl champ with the Pats and the Chiefs. In my opinion, the savior of the Chiefs season, really upped their level of play when he kicked out to left tackle to spur them on their Super Bowl run. I think he'll have a case for the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. But right now, he is a Chicago Bear. Clearly, it's very obvious looking at this. The Bears didn't like their odds of improving their offensive line as much as they wanted to without doing something drastic, especially after Kansas City franchise tagged Trey Smith. And I think that's what led to this, honestly. The Chiefs tagged Trey Smith, which puts him at the top of the guard market. So do the math here. Trey Smith, currently the highest paid guard in the league, even more so when he eventually signs a long-term deal. Kansas City's paying Creed Humphrey at the top of the market as well. With all of that in mind, something has to give on Kansas City's offensive line. And as much as I'm sure it bums out the Chiefs as well as a lot of their fans, something's got to give. And Joe Thuney is 33 years old with 1 year left on his deal. The maths, as the kids like to say. I understand why they did this. I am a little surprised, even at his advanced age, even with his contract situation. I would like to think Joe Thuney could at least fetch you a pick in this year's draft, but that's business in the NFL. The Chiefs will be looking to not remake their offensive line, but you got 2 spots you need to work on, both on the left side. Interested to see how they do that. The hits keep coming, though. New York Jets, since the last time we had a show, they released Davante Adams. Disastrous, I think, is the only way to put it. They traded a 3rd round pick midway through last season to reunite Adams with Aaron Rodgers, and now they're both gone. Adams does hit the Jets salary cap for $8 million after the cut, but it frees up $30 million. So you understand why Aaron Glenn wanted to do it as he tries to remake the New York Jets. Adams, he's 32. He's heading into his 12th NFL season, obviously closer to the end of his career than the beginning. But for as much as we might talk bad about what happened with the Jets, Davante Adams finished with 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns last season. And he did have at least 2 or 3 vintage games where he still looked like that dude. I would imagine there will still be a pretty solid market for his services, but he is not the only receiver who might be looking for new work. The Seattle Seahawks released franchise legend Tyler Lockett on Wednesday, and right after they did that, DK Metcalf requested a trade, and this is what makes it interesting. A lot of guys request trades, but immediately after that, Seattle came out and said, yeah, we'll try to work with you on that. We're not opposed to finding you a new place to play. So I'm going to go ahead and guess DK is about to be the most discussed player in the league over the next few days. Doesn't mean Seattle's doing anybody favors here. I think most people would agree DK Metcalf, not a truly elite wide receiver one, not on that short list of best guys in the league. I think he is firmly in that fringe category, though, like lower end wide receiver one, top end wide receiver two. Definitely a valuable player. He's never finished a season with fewer than 900 receiving yards. He's also played in 100 of 103 possible games for the Seahawks. So productive and available. There should be a market for that. The issue is that he's also going to want a new deal. He's entering the last year of his contract with Seattle. So you not only have to find a team that's willing to part with assets for him, but a team that's willing to do that and then turn around and pay him a new contract. I'm shamelessly stealing this idea from my guy, Justice Mosqueda. He said it earlier on Twitter on Wednesday. Green Bay makes sense to me. They are a team with a unique combination of both cap space and assets. For instance, you could offer Seattle a draft pick. And in case anybody forgot, Green Bay's got about 4 young receivers to choose from in a trade. You could send a pick and a receiver, be it Romeo Doubs, be it Christian Watson. It doesn't really matter who, but you could send a pick and a receiver to Seattle, turn around and afford to pay DK Metcalf if you want. I don't know, not the type of move we're typically used to seeing from Green Bay, but I think it would be fun. I'd throw in the Chargers and the New England Patriots as well in terms of teams that could use that caliber of receiver and who could also pay that price. And we'll go ahead and throw in the Pittsburgh Steelers as well, because they're going to be tied to every receiver for the rest of time. I am convinced. Jacksonville, not quite done with the receivers news. Jacksonville also announced they will be releasing Christian Kirk before the start of the league year. So if you are a team with a need of a veteran receiver, rest assured, several of them will be available to you in the coming days. Let's wrap this up. I think this is everything. We'll get to some bookkeeping in Dallas, because I know the Cowboys raised some eyebrows with the amount of money they've been moving around the last couple of days. For starters, on Tuesday, they signed their own player, one of the best defensive tackles in this year's free agent class, Oso Odighizuwa. He's not going anywhere. He signs for 4 years, $80 million with the Cowboys. They also brought back a few guys, Brock Hoffman, namely, who could be in line to replace Zach Martin. Zach Martin also retired Wednesday morning. Like I said, busy couple of days in Dallas. But the nuts and bolts of this is that the Cowboys have restructured the contracts of both Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, freeing up roughly $56 million in cap space. Now, to be clear, nobody took a team-friendly deal. There's no pay cuts happening here. Cowboys just moved their money around. Essentially, they converted salary into signing bonus, which allows you to move things into future years. It all sounds very boring. It essentially means the Cowboys have a lot of spending money to play with, which naturally is going to get people very excited. What are they going to do with that? That is we'll say the $55 million question. Jerry Jones said at Zach Martin's retirement press conference, he didn't see any major voids that the Cowboys need to fill in free agency, to which every Cowboys fan in the world said, huh? What? We'll see if he actually means that. You know how teams love to play coy at this time of year. But I would remind you, the Cowboys still need to sign Micah Parsons. We mentioned it. $35 million a year is the new benchmark. So they might just need every dollar possible to keep their own guys on the team. I personally would not get my hopes up that freeing up all this money means the Cowboys are about to drop a bunch of money in free agency. But crazier things have happened. It was last year, Jerry Jones said they were going all in, and then they proceeded to spend about 25 cents in free agency. Maybe this year will be different. Hope springs eternal, as always in the NFL. Stories spring eternal in the NFL, because that was just 36 hours worth of news. It's a lot to keep track of. So I'm going to watch my mouth from now on when I say we'll have new stuff to talk about, because I feel like that was somebody laughing at me. Anyway, I feel like we're all caught up. I feel like we're in a good space. So we can now jump to the bulk of the show. And that, like I said, was our first round mock draft. as we go through all 32 picks in the first round that our writers on foxsports.com made. Ralph Vacchiano and Ben Arthur joined me. It was a really fun conversation. Go ahead and check it out. Well, guys, I'm happy to have you on, and it's a recurring joke around this time of year, but this week illustrates it perfectly. We got together and did a foxsports.com writer's mock earlier in the week. And I think I don't know, did it make 36 hours before the news around the NFL blasted it all to hell? Like, as soon as our editors sent me the link to send the draft out, and I was like, I don't know, guys, this already feels dated as is, but we will do our best to adapt to that. There's a few teams here I want to highlight that maybe things have changed for them, but that's sort of the pitfall of draft season, right? You never know just how long the shelf life is going to be.
No question. It kind of gets crazy. Every time there's a little bit of news, things change, and you're going to see that a lot during free agency over the next couple of weeks. Everything that you think you know about where teams are going in the draft, they're probably going someplace else once they make their first signings.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, that's not going to stop all of us from making these kind of predictions, right? Like, I guess that's part of the fun of it, right? Like, what we all know, free agency is coming, the draft obviously later on, but as things happen, we want to come up with these predictions in the moment, even if they're irrelevant in 24 hours. So I think that's part of what makes this time of the year fun in the NFL.
I think it's easy to be jaded about mock drafts, especially when you have to make them. But I really don't get tired of the thought exercise part of it all, where, again, like, even if some of these picks have some of the logic has changed based on what's happened with trades, what's happened in free agency, that just opens your mind to a whole new line of thinking in terms of what a team might need, what they might want to do when we do get to the draft. So still plenty to talk about, even if the news is flying furiously right now. So to break it down real quickly, what we're going to do, we got all 32 first round picks. Our staff at foxsports.com made all of them. I was part of this, Ben and Ralph obviously as well. We're going to go through all 32 picks in bunches of 8. So 1 to 8, 9 to 16, et cetera, et cetera. Going to highlight some of the more interesting ones. So let's start with the top 8. And I've got the perfect 2 guys to talk about this with, as you see there on the screen. We'll start it off at number 1. Ben Arthur, you made that pick for the Tennessee Titans, and we'll kind of do this in tandem, because if you're looking ahead, you can see Ralph made the number 3 overall pick for the New York Giants. I'm going to step out on a limb and say what Tennessee does very heavily informs what might be going on for the New York Giants as well. But Ben, let's start with you, because the whispers coming out of the combine seem to indicate that Cam Ward is pretty clearly the favorite to be the first quarterback and the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, you've got the Titans taking him first overall. Does that line up with what you're seeing and hearing around Tennessee?
Yeah, it does. And look, I think we've all kind of talked about this from the beginning. This is a Titans team that needs a lot of help in a lot of different spots and a lot of premium spots. They need to get to boost this talent on this roster across the board. But if you have a guy at number 1 who you think is a franchise quarterback, I don't see why you pass on that. And of these 2 passers at the top, I mean, Cam Ward to me is clearly the top guy. I mean, looking at his traits, his poise in the pocket, ability to produce in kind of critical situations. We talk a lot about the different arm slots and whatnot that he's able to throw from, but he just has that it factor that kind of some of the top guys at the quarterback position in the NFL have, and Cam Ward seems to check a lot of those boxes. And I've kind of said this from the beginning. I think honestly, Shedeur Sanders may be a better fit on paper for Brian Callahan's offense in terms of like the accuracy and some of the other things he does that kind of remind me a little bit of Joe Burrow. But in terms of upside, I think Cam Ward is the guy, even if Shedeur may have a higher floor, in my opinion. But if, again, going for that guy who you think is a franchise quarterback, I think Cam Ward screams that to me. So yeah, that's my guy at number 1. And
this is what ties so perfectly into Ralph's pick at number 3. We talked about it while we were in Indy, Ben, and you've heard it a lot that maybe Tennessee's open for business. Maybe Tennessee's willing to trade out of that number 1 overall pick. How realistic do you think that is? Knowing, look, this is a long process. You meet with these guys, you have a chance to become very enamored and impressed with them. If Tennessee really likes Cam Ward, how willing would they actually be to trade away from that due to a deal from, let's say, the New York Giants, who seem very, very, very eager to find a quarterback? I mean, the longer we get into this, the less realistic that feels to me.
Yeah, from the Titans' perspective, like if they're like you're obviously going to look at a deal like a package if it blows you out of the park, and the Titans brass, they've been open about like if they get that kind of just earth-shattering deal, and their president of football ops, Chad Brinker, has said like he would like to have kind of such and such a number of picks in the top 100 over the next several years. Going back to my previous point, this is a team that is so deficient on talent that they have to seriously look at some of these offers that they might get, and the Giants are definitely the kind of team that have the level of desperation to maybe meet those qualifications. But again, if you think you have a franchise quarterback at the top, then you take him. I don't think you hesitate about that. And going back to what they've said about how we won't pass on a generational talent. If you think Cam Ward, for instance, is that guy, particularly at the quarterback position, I don't think you pass on that.
So as an expert on all things New York Giants, Ralph, how does that make New York feel? So in our mock, we've got Shedeur Sanders going number 2 to Cleveland. Makes perfect sense with all the noise we've heard about Cleveland being desperate to get a quarterback of their own. That leaves the Giants again, like looking for a dance partner. We saw him miss out on Matthew Stafford. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. I guess potentially Sam Darnold. There are avenues to get a quarterback in free agency, but it's got to feel awfully dicey in that Giants facility looking desperately for this quarterback. And you're seeing here, even with the number 3 overall pick, it's no guarantee.
Yeah, and they know it, which is why they bid so heavily on Matthew Stafford, being willing to meet the trade price, whatever that was, and being willing to give him $100 million or so over 2 years, which seems a little crazy for a guy who's 36 and would be coming to a team that's not really built to win now. But John Mara, the Giants co-owner, has told basically their GM and coach that they have to win this year to keep their jobs. They have to show some sort of progress. They could get away with maybe not being a playoff team if they were developing that franchise quarterback. And that would be their ideal plan. They would be drafting 1 or 2 and grab one of these 2 guys. But sitting at 3rd, they know they're kind of screwed, which is why they're looking at the veteran market. They're probably going to have to go sign, I don't know whether it's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or somebody out there, just so they have a placeholder. Ideally, they would then bring in a guy that they can develop behind him. But, the guy they like, I think, is Cam Ward. Certainly that could change in the next month. I'm not so sure that they're as sold on Shedeur Sanders, but I think he'd be a good option for them at this point. I don't think at 3 they want to take the 3rd best quarterback. So everything I've heard from them is that they want to try to move up to the number 1 pick. But obviously that depends on whether the Titans want to move and also the cost, because there's probably a limit to how much they can spend to get up there. I don't think the GM and coach necessarily will care because they're out of here if they don't win next year. But the owner might say, there's a limit to how much you can spend, even though, if you don't have a quarterback in this league, you just don't have anything.
I love the power play that comes into it there, where I'm sure Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are willing to pay whatever it costs. Like you said, yeah. John Mara's like, hang on, let's not mortgage everything for a quarterback. And they're like, John, you gave us basically a vote of no confidence 2 months ago. What do you want us to do? And I'm curious to see who wins out there. The other thing I'd love to point out, and I'd love y'all's take on this, is the irony of the situation where if you had either a quarterback or the confidence of your owner, this would be an amazing place to be, because you're basically telling me at 3, I can get the best pure football player in this draft, which teams dream of that. Getting an edge rusher like an Abdul Carter or Travis Henry at 3 overall, you pray for an opportunity like that, but not if you don't have a quarterback. So I'm curious to see how the Giants manage that. Here in the mock, we didn't do trades in the mock, Ralph, so you have them taking Abdul Carter. I'm curious for your rationale there, because I would guess this is a pick between Carter and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, if you're looking at Travis Hunter as a receiver, that doesn't fill a need necessarily for the Giants because they just drafted Malik Neighbors. If you're looking at it as a cornerback, that fills a big need. But this is maybe more of my personal preference, and what I think is their preference is that you build a defense around pass rushers, not cornerbacks. And they've got Brian Burns, they've got Kayvon Thibodeau, they've got Dexter Lawrence. That's a pretty dominant front. And if you add a guy like Abdul Carter to that mix, wherever you decide you want to play him along the defense, even if he's a rotational guy, that's suddenly a really dangerous defense, and that can really help all aspects of your team. I think he could just have more of an impact than any cornerback can. And I get a little leery of, I know that Travis Hunter wants to play both ways, and I think that's a great story. But if you're playing both ways, I wonder how much you're focusing on one. I don't know that they want to necessarily get involved in that. I just think that if you got a dominant pass rusher, frontline defender, that's going to be their choice if they can't get the quarterback of their dreams.
Ben, what's your take on this? Like, best pass rusher in the draft, arguably the best DB, best overall skill player. You can't really go wrong, but what do you prioritize?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Ralph on this one, going with the almost the quote unquote safe bet in terms of like the elite pass rusher. With a guy playing two ways, I mean, or at least trying to. There's just so much uncertainty with that. And like Ralph has illustrated just with the Giants brass, I don't think they can really afford to kind of play around. I think you need the sure thing at probably the most important position outside of quarterback. And if you can get that clear-cut number one edge guy, I think with the Giants dynamic and their situation, if you can't get Shedeur or Cam, Abdul Carter makes a ton of sense.
I agree with y'all like 99% of the time. I have always been a big pass rush over everything. And ironically, maybe it was those Super Bowl Giants teams that really made me feel that way. At the same time, I don't know if I can pass on such a unique prospect as Travis Hunter, like a guy who can play corner at that level, who I think could play at like a really, really high level, in addition to whatever he gives you on offense. I view that as a bonus. The Giants already, Brian Burns doesn't seem like he's going anywhere for a while. Dexter Lawrence, obviously one of the best in the world at what he does. I feel okay about the pass rush. I would love to have a corner of Travis Hunter's caliber on my defense. And I'll admit, like, the flashiness of it, the excitement of it, he's going to sell jerseys. He's going to put the Giants back on the national map because of what a big time player he is. I would have a hard time not drafting him if he was available. All due respect to Abdul Carter, but that is a little too intriguing for me to pass up.
But Dave, does that translate to wins though? You mentioned the Travis Hunter effect. And again, with what Dayball and Shane are dealing with in New York, they need to win. And so I agree, Hunter is a transcendent prospect in many ways. And like you said, their pass rush is good. Like, you don't necessarily have to address it. But if you can have like a top 3 pass rush with an Abdul Carter, even if you're still trying to figure it out at quarterback, I think you're in a better place moving forward. That's maybe my take. But
the brutal truth might be that the Giants are screwed no matter what if they don't get themselves a quarterback. So
a familiar position for them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you could go wrong. But like I said, I think, you've got some building blocks in your pass rush already. It would, I don't know. It would be fun to see Travis Hunter in New York, where he won a Heisman Trophy. All right, we'll wrap up the rest of the top 8. At number 4, the New England Patriots. Surprise, surprise. We do have them taking Travis Hunter. Ben, you mocked Will Johnson of Michigan to Jacksonville. Eric Williams mocked Teteroa McMillan, the Arizona receiver, to the Raiders. Mason Graham, the Michigan defensive tackle, going to New York to play alongside Quinnen Williams. And at number 8, the Carolina Panthers take Georgia edge Jalen Walker. Let's move it to 9 through 16. Tipping that off, which devastated me as a big fan of this guy, Greg Allman took for the New Orleans Saints Tyler Warren out of Penn State. And then at number 10, that leaves us with an interesting situation here. This is one of those things that has changed since we put this mock together. At number 10, our colleague Carmen Vitale mocked Kelvin Banks, the Texas offensive tackle, to the Bears. Guys, does the news of the Chicago Bears trading for all the good veteran guards, does that change your opinion at all? I mean, we knew the Bears needed offensive line help coming into this league year. They've already done so much work. What do you think? Do you add another blue chip offensive lineman to that group to make a strength even stronger? Or could this be a situation where moves in March change what your strategy might be in April?
I think you can add another young offensive lineman because you should build through the trenches. So it wouldn't be the craziest strategy. But I think one of the secrets of the draft is while on Friday morning we'll hear, or actually Thursday night of the draft, we'll hear from every GM saying we took the best player available. The truth is teams almost always draft with need somewhat in mind. They're looking at the roster, looking at holes we have to fill. And if they've just filled 2 big holes with a lot of money, they can now use that draft pick somewhere else. So I think it wouldn't be nuts because I like having a lot of offensive linemen, but if you've got the 10th overall pick, you want to have a guy who can have a big impact right away. And I think that, maybe, you get another weapon to help out your young quarterback. Maybe you build something on defense. There's a lot of other places, a lot of other holes you can plug where that 10th pick might be used in a better way.
So let me pose this question to you, Ben. And in our mock, we have this guy falling a little ways, but I think seeing what the Bears have done on the offensive line, it's hard not to think about Ben Johnson coming from Detroit, where he had 2 fantastic running backs doing their thing for the Lions. Obviously, Chicago has DeAndre Swift. Would it be a surprise to you, or would it be the right call for Chicago to be the landing spot for Ashton Jeanty if he is available?
I can see it. I could definitely see it. But to go back to your previous point about the O-line, like I'm on board with them drafting an O-line, even though they've just traded for Jonah Jackson and all-pro guard Joe Thuney. I mean, kind of going back to Ralph's point about like building through the trenches, like you want to make sure that your short and long-term future is secured with Caleb Williams. I mean, they were that bad up front. He was getting killed in the games I watched. That they need to set that foundation, and the more depth you can have on the offensive line, the better. It's not like these guys grow on trees. And Kelvin Banks, what we had in our particular mock draft, he's a guy who could play guard and tackle, and so I like that a lot. Is the idea of Jeanty appealing? Yeah, definitely, it's appealing. But I'm not sure if I would pick him that high, especially when you're still not 100% sure about your O-line at this point, even with the moves they've made. The idea of adding maybe taking the first receiver here, as I think Ralph alluded to, you are Keenan Allen is going to be a free agent, and so I think that's a spot you can address. But yeah, I'm high on the idea of O-line at 10, honestly, for the Bears. They stack up those O-line. Yeah. I like that thought process for the Bears.
I think given what the Bears have invested on defense the last few years, and B, Ben Johnson's background, one way or the other, I think you add to the offense. If that's Ashton Jeanty, that's very fun. If it's an offensive lineman, that is also fun. Kind of be a surprise to see them spend another top 10 pick on a receiver, but if you like the guy that much, who am I to judge? We'll keep it pushing here. If we can throw our picks back on the screen. We had Mikael Williams of Georgia going to San Francisco. And then Ralph, you made the pick for the Dallas Cowboys, which I love this because this is a perfect example of the unpredictability of the NFL draft, because I think those of us who follow this, those of us who read mocks and write mocks, it would be a surprise to see Will Campbell fall to Dallas at number 12. But I like the idea that if he's there for them to draft, even if offensive line isn't Dallas's biggest need, if a guy of that caliber is sitting there for you at number 12, I think it would be awfully hard to turn away from.
It was my complete motivation for doing that. I thought about Ashton Genty. I thought about a receiver. I can make really good arguments for why they need both of those. I thought about a defensive tackle in that spot, something to bolster their run defense up the middle a little bit. But when a guy like that, who, he could be a top 5 pick before this is all over, is sitting there staring you in the face, and you've got Zach Martin retiring, so you've got a spot open on the offensive line. You've got a team and an owner and GM that knows that the best Dallas teams were powered by strong offensive lines. It's a value pick that you just can't pass up. I don't think I think they can find a running back. I think they can find a receiver, and they could go out. Clearly, free agency comes first. They can go out and do that maybe in free agency. But if you get to the draft and you've plugged some of those holes and a guy like that drops to you, I don't know how you don't jump on him.
It's the beauty of pro football. The Cowboys re-signed restricted free agent Brock Hoffman on Tuesday. And Brock, he played very well in Zach Martin's place at times last year. He played 7 games when Zach was out injured. Looks like a promising young player. The Cowboys obviously prioritized bringing him back. I bet you they're going to say a lot of nice stuff about how they think he can step into Zach Martin's shoes. If Will Campbell is available at number 12, that might not matter even the slightest bit to them if they have a chance to take a guy with that kind of athleticism and plug him in at right guard.
And all they have to do is look up in the division to see the value of that. The Philadelphia Eagles have constantly had, it's not just 5, they go 7, sometimes 8 deep on that offensive line. So when a Jason Kelce retires, somebody can step right in. Lane Johnson gets hurt, somebody can step right in. You're going to need 7 offensive linemen every season. So just keep loading up with good ones and your offense won't stop.
Wrapping up the rest of these 8 picks, I was right after Ralph. Ralph, you broke my heart. I was in charge of the Miami Dolphins pick. I was desperate to go offensive line, but y'all snatched them all up. So I mocked Shamar Stewart. You can never have too many edge rushers, as we've talked about. Ben, you drafted Colston Loveland of Michigan, the tight end to the Indianapolis Colts, another weapon for them on offense. At number 16, the Arizona Cardinals take Walter Nolan, the Ole Miss defensive tackle. Let's throw it to the next batch. And Ben, I wanted to pick your brain about this specifically. This is, I think, one of the more interesting discrepancies here. So at 17, our buddy Henry McKenna mocked Nick Scourton of Texas A&M to the Bengals, which perfect timing. Sam Hubbard just retired. But at number 18, this is where we have Ashton Genty going, which is hilarious because, of course, the Seattle Seahawks would draft a running back. This was Eric Williams' pick, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot. But A, would they go back to that well again in Seattle? And B, in light of the news on Wednesday that DK Metcalf is on the trading block, maybe this is a spot for a different type of offensive skill player.
Yeah, Eric is my guy, but I wouldn't have gone Ashton Genty even before the news, before we recorded, but even just especially on top of that, like I just don't see that. I mean, with Tyler Lockett out the door and DK Metcalf seemingly so as well, I think maybe this is a spot where you take a receiver, maybe the first receiver off the board. At this point, I was actually in Seattle during the Rashad Penny experience, and that didn't go over well. And they already have 2 great backs between Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, and I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if Genty is here, I mean, he'd certainly be the best player left on the board. But I think you either maybe go receiver here or you trade back if you're John Schneider. Maybe if someone wants to get at Genty or whoever else, I think if you're the Seahawks, you can maybe trade back here at this spot. And that's something John Schneider loves to do, especially at the back half of the first round too. So
Dave, I don't mean to jump ahead on you, but when the 18th pick was being made, I was holding on to the 21st pick for the Steelers, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, they may lose Najee Harris in free agency. Boy, if Genty is still available at 18, I'd be thinking of trading up if I were them.
That's the best part about doing these in a group is we all just break each other's hearts because you spend the morning researching what you want to do for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then Eric Williams just dashes it all to hell by taking Ashton. That is a very interesting thought, Ralph. I mean, the Steelers bulked up their offensive line last year. I know everybody and their mother is going to talk about how the Steelers need a wide receiver. And I would guess maybe Steelers fans don't want to go back to the first round running back well so quickly, but I don't know, man. I think Ashton Genty is firmly in the category of guys you should feel comfortable, even happy drafting in the first round.
Yeah, and I think the value is definitely there at that stage of the draft. Maybe you don't think of him as a top 10 pick, but I think he's got the talent to be a top 20 pick. You got to be able to move the ball. You need weapons. And I think they had a pretty decent offense for most of the season. Russell Wilson faded a little down the stretch, but they certainly looked like a team that could have used more firepower. Whether you add another receiver, added a running back like Genty, certainly if they lose Najee Harris, it's a huge need for them. I think you ignore the fact that they may have done this before in the first round and don't want to do it again. At this point, it's a need for them and a need in today's game. I think we've now started to see what running backs can do, and maybe people have to kind of get over that. Well, these are first round pick. I don't know what to use it on that position. I think when the guy's worth it, you just jump.
The irony here is I could easily see two of these picks getting flopped. We had the Raiders taking Tet McMillan at 6 and the Seahawks taking Ashton Genty at 18. I would not be surprised at all if Ashton Genty is the Raiders pick at number 6, because that feels like a very Raiders thing to do. And then, Tet McMillan, great player, a 6'5" receiver who, there's questions about his top end speed. I could see him being available for the Seattle Seahawks if they want a receiver at 18 overall. I don't think that's too far-fetched.
Yeah, and he'd fit perfectly right. Like if they do lose, if they do trade DK, like having a big-bodied receiver like that who can really change a game. I mean, he's quite the talent, and you're going to need someone to take pressure off of Jackson Smith and Jigba, who all of a sudden is going to have all the eyeballs on him. I mean, the Seahawks had a really good situation where they had 3 guys who commanded a lot of attention, and now all of a sudden those eyeballs can, those coverages can focus exclusively on JSN. And so I think a guy like McMillan would honestly make a lot of sense for them. So
let's wrap up this middle part of the draft. At 19, we had Alabama's Jihad Campbell going to Tampa Bay. At 20, it was Kenneth Grant of Michigan, the defensive tackle, going to Denver. Ralph, without Ashton Genty there, gave the Steelers Derek Harmon, the DT out of Oregon. Hey, anytime you can get a guy to learn under Cam Hayward, that's totally fine. At 22, the LA Chargers take Amarian Hampton, the North Carolina running back. It is starting to feel like we're going to see multiple running backs go in the first round of this draft. And then one last thing I wanted to focus on here, Ben, you and I had back-to-back picks. I, at 23, gave the Green Bay Packers Siobhan Revell Jr., the East Carolina corner, tore his ACL during the season, so I'm sure that's something teams will be concerned about, but a phenomenal athlete, widely regarded as one of the best corners in this class. Right after that, you had the Minnesota Vikings taking Jahdae Barron out of Texas, another cornerback. So I guess this is our first cornerback run after Travis Hunter goes in the top 5. I like a corner for Green Bay for the very obvious reason that I don't think Jair Alexander is long for the Packers. I think the writing is pretty clearly on the wall there. He's only played 50% of their games the last 4 seasons. Not going to be surprising if he's not in green and gold by the time the draft rolls around. For the Vikings, what was your rationale there? Did I snipe your guy? Are we just trying to get Brian Flores more weapons? What do you think?
First of all, we've talked about how there was some heartbreak right earlier in first round, but honestly, I was relieved that you didn't, because I was targeting Jahdae Barron for the Vikings at 24. So I was very much relieved when you didn't take him But yeah, for me, the thought process was very simple for Minnesota. I mean, all three of their starting cornerbacks are hitting free agency, and Byron Murphy, who's in the slot, Shaq Griffin, and Stephon Gilmore on the outside, and then one of their top backups is hitting free agency as well. And so they could be without like their four of their top five corners next season. And I think with Barron makes a lot of sense. I mean, he tested really well at the combine, but he's super versatile. Brian Flores is going to be able to do a lot of different things with him. He plays outside corner. He can play in the slot. He can roam around the box. I know he played some linebacker at Texas as well. And for a guy like Brian Flores who likes versatile pieces like that, right? And we know his tendencies for like these different pressure packages or whatever it is. I think Barron makes a lot of sense for them. I mean, he fits a need. He might at this point even be the best player on the board, at least the way we have it constructed. And so I felt like for the Vikings there, it just kind of checked a lot of boxes.
You never want to hear that the team right after you is relieved by your decision, but I'll stand by my guy. I like Siobhan Ravel Jr. Like I said, I think the injury is going to be something to watch there. But if any team is not going to let the immediate future affect a 4-year decision, it's the Green Bay Packers. They're better at that type of stuff than anybody. Ben, I'll let you keep rolling because to wrap up these last 8 picks in our mock. At 25, the least surprising thing ever, you had the Houston Texans taking an offensive lineman, which whenever you look at the first round, there's always going to be situations that just scream an obvious thing. And Houston addressing their offensive line feels pretty darn obvious right now.
Yeah, they have to. And look, you can make a case for a receiver. I mean, Stephon Diggs might not be back. We don't know what Tank Dell's status is for 2025. It's really just kind of Nico Collins to be sure with the Texans. But yeah, they need the O-line help. I mean, we all saw it last year. We saw it in the divisional round game against the Chiefs. We saw the way CJ was getting hit. We saw kind of that regression. A large part of that was because of the pressure. I mean, they couldn't protect well up front. I mean, they're going to have a new play caller next season, but a lot of people don't talk about how they also changed O-line coaches as well. And so they're going to have to reimagine some things up front. And I think with the guy I selected, Jonah, I don't want to botch his last name, but
Vacchiano, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. He's a guy who played significant snaps at 3 different spots on the offensive line for the Wildcats, at right guard, at right tackle, at left tackle. The Texans are a team over the last few years who've had to shuffle a lot of guys. Like their high-paid right tackle, Titus Howard, has actually played a lot of guard the last 2 years because of injuries and because of play of like their interior linemen not really being up to snuff. And so I feel like not only does my pick kind of check that need for the offensive line, but in terms of being a versatile guy up front, I think he fits that bill as well.
We're getting down to the contenders now, so let's go a little more quickly. The Rams at 26, Eric Williams had them taking Emeka Egbuka of Ohio State. At 27, the Ravens take Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. The Lions take Donovan Izaraku, the edge rusher out of Boston College. Ralph, I think at 29, if there was any doubt before that the Washington Commanders were going to take a defender here and try to help Dan Quinn's defense, trading for Deebo Samuel kind of seems to seal the deal for me. You have him taking James Pierce out of Tennessee. If it's him or if it's another name, I'm feeling pretty confident this is a defender at 29.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you could flip a coin as to whether it's an edge rusher or a defensive tackle at this point, especially if they end up trading Jonathan Allen during the offseason, which is a possibility. It was the glaring need on this team. They were not good at stopping the run. They were better than you'd think at rushing the passer, but they didn't have that standout stud edge rusher that teams like to have that can really grab the attention of opposing offenses. It's really weird because it wasn't that long ago where this was a defensive line in the Ron Rivera era that had 4 number 1 picks on it, but they've gotten rid of Chase Young and Montez Sweat, and now it leaves Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen, and Allen might be gone too. So they've really got to rebuild not only the front four, but the depth of that position. And, I think their offense is in tremendous shape, adding Deebo Samuel. They obviously have the quarterback. They have all the pieces they need. You could make an argument that they should help out the offensive line a little bit. And maybe if there's a good offensive lineman they like there, that could be the pick too. But that, I think it was the 30th ranked run defense, a middle of the pack pass rush. That to me is the glaring thing that they need to upgrade to really get them to the next level.
At 30, Henry's got Buffalo taking Matthew Golden out of Texas, which would be ironic if they took the speedy receiver out of Texas the year after passing on Xavier Worthy. We'll see how that goes. At 31, Kansas City, it makes perfect sense to mock them in offensive tackle right now. Obviously, left tackle was a problem spot all year, and they just traded away Joe Thuney. I am curious, though, guys, Kansas City has shown a willingness to spend on veterans in problem spots. I'd be a little surprised if by the time the dust settles in a week or two that Kansas City hasn't found a way to get some type of qualified left tackle onto their roster, and maybe that'll open up their options a little bit in the draft. And then to wrap it up, Ralph, I laughed when I saw that you made this pick. You got the Eagles taking Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle out of Texas, which just sounds like the most Howie Roseman behavior possible. They got Zach Bond back. They got Saquon Barkley locked up for 2 more years. They're probably not done. They're probably going to go do some other stuff in free agency. So if you're picking at the back of the draft and you already have 2 great defensive tackles, why not? Yeah, go get your Milton Williams replacement in the draft. Perfect Howie Roseman.
Right. I mean, you could flip a coin here too, offensive line or defensive line. That's the Roseman style pick. They're probably going to lose Josh Sweat, though maybe not at this point. I thought they were going to lose Zach Bond too. So who knows with Howie Roseman? But if you lose Josh Sweat, you lose Milton Williams, you've got to restock that defensive line. We don't know if they're going to exercise the 5th-year option on Jordan Davis yet. So that could create another future hole. So he just loves building through the trenches. I will add this too. If our draft falls the way it had with only 2 quarterbacks going in the first round, this could be a trade down candidate spot too. Somebody might look at a Jackson Dart or somebody like that and think and decide, I want to get into the first round and grab this guy so I have an extra year of control. And so I don't have to sweat out another day to see if anybody trades up to the top of the second round to get him. And if Howie Roseman, looking at the fact that he's got a roster that's going to start getting old in the next few years, it's going to start getting expensive, there might be some turnover. If he has a chance to grab a few extra picks and not drop down that far, I could see him doing that to a quarterback needy team.
I said it on our writers' call, and I have no problem saying it into a microphone. I really think one way or the other, Jalen Milroe is going to wind up being a first-round pick or a guy that a team is willing to call into the first round about. And look, you can give me all the critiques of his game that you want. I know that they're there. I also know how desperate NFL teams are for quarterback play, and I know the talent that Jalen Milroe brings to the table. I think that makes perfect sense. It would be a little ironic if the team that employs Jalen Hurts helped facilitate a trade up for somebody like Jalen Milroe. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Guys, this was a ton of fun. I could have done every single pick, but that would have taken something like 3 hours. But the beauty of it is, give it 3 more business days and we'll have a whole new league landscape to talk about. So we can do this again soon. But man, this was fun. I appreciate y'all hopping on.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you.
This was our pleasure. And definitely we'll do this again. I thought that doing that mock draft was great. Hopefully it doesn't last 3 hours, but I love doing them.
You can go check out the rest of our picks, by the way, if you want to see the rationale for all of it. We went in depth on all of them. FoxSports.com or the Fox Sports app. And if I had to guess, we'll be doing another one very soon. But until then, I appreciate the help, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
This episode of the NFL on Fox podcast is brought to you by Daiya Pizza, featuring dairy-free cheese made with the innovative Daiya Oat Cream Blend. Let's talk about game day snacks. Pizza is a must, but if you've ever doubted that a dairy-free option could match up, Daiya is here to change your mind. Thanks to their Daiya Oat Cream Blend, you can get all the creamy, melty goodness that stretches and melts just like dairy with a rich, savory taste that perfectly complements every bite without any of the dairy. Their thin, crispy crust is the foundation for bold, savory toppings, and the standout? Their cheese, made with Daiya Oat Cream Blend. It's rich, stretchy, and melts just like dairy cheese. So whether you're hosting a big watch party or keeping it low-key with family, Daiya makes it easy to enjoy dairy-free eating while delivering everything you love about pizza. No commitment to dairy-free eating is required. Daiya pizzas are designed for everyone to enjoy. Make your next pizza night or game day spread FOMO-free. That's fear of missing dairy. Visit DaiyaFoods.com to learn more or grab Daiya Pizza at major retailers like Whole Foods, Kroger, or Walmart. Check them out on Instagram or TikTok for even more inspiration.
All right, that does it for the show. Thanks again to Ben and Ralph. We will be back on Tuesday, which, if you're following the NFL calendar, pretty big implications there. The legal tampering window, so basically the unofficial start of free agency, is Monday afternoon. So the next time we have a show, there will have been even more news. And I don't say that flippantly this time. I say it very sincerely. We will have a lot to talk about. Sure, there are more trades in the mix. We'll have some big-time contracts getting handed out. They say the league year starts on Wednesday, but the madness really gets going early on Monday. So find us in your feed. Go get us on Spotify. Go get us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you prefer to get your NFL news. We will be there to recap the beginning of free agency with y'all. Starts Monday. We will be back Tuesday. We got you covered. As always, I appreciate it, and I will chat with y'all so soon.